3 years ago, my life changed in a way I never expected. At the time, I was just an ordinary woman trying to rebuild my life after a series of difficult events. My parents had passed away, and I had inherited a small family company that was struggling to survive. I worked day and night to keep it running, but the stress and pressure often felt overwhelming. That was when Daniel appeared in my life. He was introduced to me as a bodyguard hired by the board of directors because the company had recently received a few suspicious threats. At first, I didn't think much about it. Daniel was quiet, professional, and incredibly disciplined. He rarely spoke unless it was necessary, and he always kept a respectful distance. But from the very first day, something about him felt different. Daniel always seemed to appear exactly when I needed help. If I was carrying heavy documents, he would silently take them from my hands. If I stayed late at the office, he would wait patiently outside my door to make sure I got home safely. If I looked tired, he would remind me to take a break in his calm and steady voice. Over time, his presence became something I relied on more than I realized. Despite spending so much time together, Daniel remained a mystery. He never talked about his personal life. Whenever I asked where he came from, or what he did before becoming a bodyguard, he would simply smile politely and change the subject. At first, I assumed he was just a private person. But slowly, I began noticing small things that didn't quite add up. Daniel spoke several languages fluently. He understood complex financial reports when he accidentally glanced at my documents. Once, during a meeting with investors, he quietly corrected a calculation I had made, and it turned out he was right. That wasn't something an ordinary bodyguard would usually know. Still, I didn't question it too much. My focus was on saving the company, and Daniel was simply there to protect me. Or so I believed. Days turned into months, and months turned into years. Daniel became part of my daily life in a way that felt natural and comforting. Whenever challenges appeared, he stood beside me like a silent shield. But there was one thing I never fully understood. Sometimes I would catch him looking at me with an expression that was difficult to describe. It wasn't just concern or responsibility. It was something deeper, something warmer. Yet whenever our eyes met, he would quickly look away. 3 years passed like this. Then one evening, everything changed. I had just finished an exhausting meeting with potential investors who were considering buying out my company. The offer they made was tempting, but something about it felt wrong. When I walked out of the office building, Daniel was waiting as usual. "Long day," he said gently. I sighed. "They want to take control of the company." Daniel looked thoughtful for a moment. "And what do you want?" "I want to keep it," I said honestly. "My parents built this business. I don't want to lose it." For the first time in years, Daniel stepped slightly closer, his voice calm but firm. "Then don't sell." I laughed softly. "It's not that simple. They're powerful investors." Daniel didn't reply immediately. Instead, he looked at the city lights stretching across the night. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "things are not always what they seem." I didn't understand what he meant at the time. The next morning, I was called into an emergency meeting with the board. When I entered the conference room, something felt different. Everyone looked nervous. And then I saw him. Daniel was sitting at the head of the table, not standing by the wall like a bodyguard. Sitting. The room fell silent as I stared at him in confusion. "Daniel, what are you doing?" He stood slowly, his expression calm but serious. "My real name," he said, "is Daniel Carter." The name hit the room like thunder. Even I recognized it immediately. Daniel Carter was the billionaire CEO of one of the largest global investment companies in the world. My mind struggled to process the information. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I wanted to tell you many times." The board members began explaining everything. 3 years ago, Daniel's company had quietly become the largest shareholder in my family business. But instead of controlling it, he chose to protect it. The threats we received weren't random. They came from rival investors trying to force the company into selling. So Daniel made a decision no one expected. He personally came to protect the company. And me, disguised as a bodyguard. For 3 years, my heart pounded as I looked at him. "You lied to me." His eyes softened with regret. "I hid the truth," he admitted. "But I never lied about protecting you." The room felt too small for the storm of emotions inside me. "Why?" I asked. Daniel took a deep breath. "Because 3 years ago, I met you at a charity event. I tried to remember. Then slowly, a distant memory surfaced. A crowded hall. A short conversation with a stranger about my parents' company. You listened to me talk about my dreams, he continued quietly. You didn't know who I was, and you didn't care. You just believed in your company and the people who worked there. His voice grew softer. That was the first time in years someone spoke to me like I was just a person. The room remained silent. So you followed me? I asked. No, he said with a small smile. I invested in the company first. But when the threats began, I knew the board would hire security. And you decided to do it yourself. Yes. I couldn't believe it. A billionaire CEO working as my bodyguard. Daniel looked at me with the same quiet expression I had seen for years. I wanted to protect something important. And the company? He shook his head slightly. You. My heart skipped. The board quietly left the room, giving us privacy. Now it was just the two of us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. 3 years of memories flooded my mind. Every moment he had been there. Every silent act of kindness. You stayed for 3 years, I said softly. Yes. Why didn't you leave? Daniel hesitated. Then he said the words I never expected. Because somewhere along the way, protecting you stopped being my duty. His voice was calm but filled with emotion. It became the most important thing in my life. I felt my chest tighten. All this time, I whispered, you were hiding who you were. I didn't want my wealth or position to change how you saw me. And now, Daniel looked directly into my eyes. Now the truth is out. And I understand if you're angry. I wasn't angry. I was overwhelmed. 3 years of quiet loyalty suddenly made sense. You never left my side, I said. I never will, he replied gently. For the first time, the distance that had always existed between us disappeared. The mysterious bodyguard I had trusted for years was gone. But the man standing in front of me was still the same person who waited outside my office every night to make sure I got home safely. And suddenly, I realized something important. Daniel hadn't just protected my company. He had protected my heart from a world that often felt too harsh. 3 years ago, a stranger had quietly stepped into my life. Now I finally understood the truth. He wasn't just my bodyguard. He was the man who had been standing beside me all along. Not because he had to, but because he chose to.